Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan wa marhaban bikum, and welcome to another edition of Debunked here on INX Prime. We continue the focus from last week on issues pertaining to Palestine. Last week we spoke about the very brutal realities on the ground, the intentional starvation of Palestinian people in Gaza, the targeted assassinations and murder of medics, of journalists. Unfortunately, on the ground, nothing much has changed for the better in terms of the reality. Yes, in recent hours, we've heard about Hamas being willing to accept a ceasefire proposal. We've heard about Netanyahu not being too bothered about the protests within Israel, which are trying to put pressure on him to secure the release of the hostages. And it seems the protesters understand that they're not going to secure the release of the hostages without the genocide ending. That said, the international isolation continues. That is something that even Israelis are saying bothers Netanyahu somewhat. But the only one at the moment who can get him to stop politically is Trump. But he doesn't seem to be willing to do so. Actually, in recent days, Trump's focus has been primarily on Ukraine, and he's meeting with Putin and Russia and the like. But associated with that, right, is media bias, propaganda, and how over decades, I mean, this is not only about the last 22 months or so, since October 7th, but this is about almost 8 decades of occupation, oppression, and genocide. And one of the reasons why Israel has been able to act for so long with the degree of impunity that it has been doing with is because of the narrative that they've been able to spin and the extent to which they control, especially the media narrative. And that is what comes on the spotlight on the program today, where we are joined by Hassan Lorgat, a man of many caps, much experience from the trade union movements to civic activist to policy and advocacy, and even a media justice advocate. Now, we're going to be focusing the program on an article which he has penned for the Muslim Views. And in that article, he reveals how sponsored trips take place here in South Africa for media houses and for journalists in South Africa. And it is done in a clandestine way and only revealed when pressure is put. And what does this mean? What's actually happening behind the scenes? What's the extent of this kind of operation? We welcome him to the program. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and shukran for your time.
Wa alaikum salam, and thank you for having me.
So, many would have heard about the story in some detail. Some would have read your article, but let's just take it from the perspective of those viewers who don't know much about it. Give us the story in summary.
Well, there are 3 news houses, 2 of them quite reputable. The Citizen came to fame during apartheid for Infogate scandal created by apartheid apparatchiks. The Sunday Times is a newspaper of record. When it publishes you, it makes news. And the third one basically is Biz News. Biz News is edited by Alec Hogg, who's an experienced journalist who's been he's gone everywhere where the media takes him. And basically, I complained over the months of May, June. I complained that the newspapers during April and May wrote articles where the people interviewed resembled each other. They were like almost the same people. But let me just go back a little bit. So I complained when I heard the Sunday Times had not been declaring who funded it. So we hear this in our coffee houses and at home, etc. And I thought, no, I've done a number of complaints. Let me complain, write to the Sunday Times. And they said to me, hey, Hassan, we have already apologized. And of course, I was not happy with the apology. It was hidden away in a corner. It was not prominent. In fact, as my subsequent complaint last week was it was not on all the platforms. But as I was doing that, I said, let me check which other people have done the similar story. And my methodology was very simple. I simply took the names of people who were being interviewed, and then I found there is Haviv Gur, Lieutenant General Dror, Lieutenant General Zahari, you got these names, right? And then they balanced all those people they interviewed with Dr. Sabri Saidam. And then I thought, okay, let me take this. I write to a complaint to the press ombuds to say, listen, the Citizen interviewed the same people. I didn't give the Citizen a chance to complain. I said, the Sunday Times already admitted that they were funded by the Jewish Board of Deputies. So I put that complaint in about the Citizen. I put the complaint in also about Biz News, where I said the same thing to them. When I wrote to Biz News as a non-press council member, they simply said to me, Hassan, don't worry, we're onto it, we'll fix it. And I must say they fixed it quite well, but they didn't acknowledge that they were alerted to fix it in an online paper. The Citizen did a correction, and much better than the Star. I found the Star was the weakest, and the Star apologized in a way, it's almost reluctantly apologizing. And as I say now, that they actually did not apologize correctly. And when they apologized, they put again the image of only the Jewish victims of, of October 7, which I don't have a problem with. But my complaint was, what about the Palestinians who are already now, as we speak, 60,000, very conservatively stated, killed, mostly women and children, to close to 270 journalists. So in many ways, I wanted the article, especially since Msomi wrote about two sides of the coin, two sides of the story. And I was really unhappy about this. So the other day, just Mulana, before I continue along, let me say, the other day, the editor came onto another program, and he challenged and he complained that I had initially sent a wrong email to a wrong email address. So I confess that these are things, I do a lot of things, as you point out. But I eventually pointed out to them on the 15th of May, one Dr. Manjra wrote to them. He wrote directly to the editor, Msomi, editor at large, right? And no one replied to him. On the 23rd, the said editor, Msomi, replies, I'm sorry I missed this email correspondence. I see that you sent it on the 15th. I'm going to follow up with them this morning and hope you give your feedback to the end of the business today. That was the last time that Dr. Manjra heard from them. I called him on Sunday at 1:30 p.m. and he says no one ever got back to him. He says when he tried to call them, and he used his words, he said they ghosted him, right? Sure. When he went to the ombuds office, they said Hassan has already done a complaint, etc., etc. So it's not about emails. It is not about a small error. What I did that is very, very different. I'm showing that there's a conspiracy amongst three editors who collectively enjoy 90 years of editorial expertise, 90 years, and they don't make this mistake. I said in one program, and Iqbal Jasad liked it, I said, this is the kalima of journalists. You will declare who funds you so that people can then choose how to respond to you. And, I think it's very appropriate. They can't make that mistake. And if they all made the mistake separately, we're in a bigger problem than we are now. They acted in conspiracy. And I'm accusing the press ombuds office that they seem to have an inability to analyze, connect the dots, to see the connections. I'm alleging conspiracy. Don't make these people just apologize one by one by one. They must talk about how they acted in concert with a Zionist lobby group that is so powerful that at the same time took politicians to Israel, Palestine to get the message right for kind of Hasbara training, if you like.
So in summary, right, journalists were sponsored by the South African Jewish Board of Deputies to undertake a trip to Israel. They came back, they write about it, they write about who they interviewed. You picked up that there's a kind of synergy, if you like, between these articles, which alerted you and aroused suspicions. And that's when you uncovered that these were sponsored trips, which are not problematic in itself. It's problematic when you don't disclose it. that, listen, I'm giving this view, or this is my article, this is my interview, but I underwent this particular trip and I was sponsored by this entity. Is that at the core of it?
That's the core of it. But you know, when I approach them separately or even through the Ombuds office, they basically acknowledged, because I simply said, the Sunday Times admitted that they were funded. Then the rest of them just fell in line, because the Sunday Times, if you like, is a paper of a bigger record, if you like, more power. And they all admitted. Now the point is, and this is where the Ombuds office has to come to the party. We want them to hold, in fact, I asked for a public discussion. But you can understand, when journalists are accused of being on the take to make stories go away, when journalists refuse to be on the take for stories to go away, like the 60,000 story, right? It is very, very important that we actually have an inquiry, like the Kathy Satchwell-led inquiry of 5 years ago, right? That we need to have that so that we see where we stand, where are we standing with media ethics. But if journalists and newspaper houses are falling on the very, very basic one, declaring who funded them, right? We have a problem. Now, I want to say this to you, Mulana. They failed to declare that they were funded by the Jewish Board of Deputies, a member of the South African Zionist Federation. When you are so compromised, you are unable to keep politicians to account, right? Because when these 10 politicians went, right, to the ACDP, DA, Patriotic Alliance, when they went, this level of scrutiny that we require from the media was not there. They went and they met the president of Israel, right, Herzog. They met him. And this is a concerted international campaign where UK members of parliament, Labour Party members, also went on this junket, right? And so when you are compromised, in fact, I wrote a naughty poem, Mulana, I'll have to share it with you privately, where I said first they came for the journalists, right? Then they came for our members of parliament. Then they came for me. When they came for me, there was no one around to kind of support, basing it on Pastor Nimbola's poem. But you know, when they went for the journalists, they basically took them out of the game. So you had Emma Powell from the DA, Bridget Masango, Monty Mdluli, Bonginkosi Madikizela. They all said in the annual record they went for fact finding. Glynis Breitenbach, Myberg, Catherine Christie declared that they all got a gift of 110,000 rand to go on this junket, this political people. But at the same time, the UK politicians, about 5 of them, reported in their declaration of interest, they paid 2,600. The value of the trip was 2,600 per person in UK pounds. The ACDP's Stephen Swart said he went on a religious fact-finding vision. Patriotic Alliance, Ashley Saul says, to understand Israel-Hamas conflict. Millicent Matopa from the PA did not even think it fit to report. So I really want to say to you, Mulana, you as a media activist and really professional, that it seems that we are doing more conversations here about how the media fails to do its work, and then our parliamentarians don't seem to have the same level of scrutiny. And this should not end. It's just the beginning.
Is it an ethical requirement for a journalist to disclose that I went on this trip and it was sponsored by this entity, or is it actually a legal requirement? Is there a legal breach here?
It is a moral, it's an article of faith for journalists. It is, I think, around clause 2, that to be a journalist, they bound themselves by belonging to the press council, that they will declare these outside interests or any other inducements, they will declare it. Look at us, we have high moral standards. We will account for undue influences. And when they fail that, they've got to fall by their sword. And I'm not asking for them, any of them, to lose their jobs, but I really want that the sanctions be very, very severe for failing to disclose, because they undermine public trust of their readers, but they also undermine our democracy. These are the very people who will be loudly speaking, the DA and others, that this black politician is corrupt. Any politician, irrespective of color, black, white, or green, must be called out for stealing, eating public funds. They must be called out and hauled over the coals. But when you do the same and you deny that you've had this inducement, this support, this sponsorship, come out, admit that you've done wrong so that we can judge you and forgive you, because we need these houses to keep power to account. You remember, the media set itself up as the fourth estate, that we are here to keep a check on power. And I keep saying, in this particular case, the government is on the right side of history. When in December 2023, they took Israel to the ICJ and said to them, you will be causing a famine. All the things that we are witnessing now, our government took up front. But you know what the Sunday Times did? In November of that year, a month after the disaster, the attack of Hamas, and a month before the ICJ case, basically the same Walter Msomi, Stembison Stombi wrote, isn't it time for us to talk about other things and not just talk about Palestine? Is it not time? He's not alone. Others have said the same. That was a month before this massacre became the full genocide that we know.
Do
South
you
Africa was right.
suspect, Hassan, I mean, having uncovered this much, that there may be even more here, right? You've mentioned which publications are implicated, but we're talking about 22 months of intense reportage on the issue, although the Palestinian crisis, is much longer than that.
Yes,
but
decades.
we talk about politicians, we spoke about some media houses. Is there a need for investigative journalists now to dig deeper and say, how much of a conspiracy is there? How much of a narrative is actually being bought?
Mulana, I think you're right in that the vibrancy of our democracy, and Palestine is a very, very important part of our conscience, right? So I think that I've linked this Peter Louis Mayberg's investigations to this. I've linked, there are allegations that one of our ministers said, I've paid journalists before to make a story go away, right? This is just out there. So, I really think we have enough grounds not to have an investigation around Palestine, although in the time of a genocide, when our government took the right side of history, to ask the question whether the fourth estate is not compromised by financial interests or other inducements. Can we trust them? Are they just another WhatsApp group? Because ultimately, this station, INX and others, we come to you because we know your levels of scrutiny, fact-checking and that is supreme compared to a neighborhood WhatsApp group. And the media has to answer a lot. So when for example, when Msomi wrote in 19 November 2023, he mentioned there, very, very interesting in that article, he said, that we won't be able to see the other side of a story anywhere because we don't have journalists on the ground, he writes. This is a month after October. And he says, if a group like Gift of the Givers doesn't take us there, we won't go there. When he writes the story now, this year, he doesn't go to the Gift of the Givers to say, hey, man, how do we get into Gaza to get that real balance? They go to Dr. Saidam, a really good man. Sabri Saidam is highly rated, intelligent, etc., right? But he's linked to Fatah, he's elsewhere. If you want to have a real balance, have that. Myself, I think I'm really asking myself, Mulana, can we have balance in the time of a genocide? Isn't it time that we unite? We don't ask the stormtroopers of the SS, what is your view? Why is your foot on the neck of a Jewish person? We don't ask the rapist for his point of view when he's raping a person. We know it's wrong. So it's that level of calling that we want, that unity. I'm not saying at times that we shouldn't have here the other side, but in the time of a genocide, we really, really have to make sure that we stop the killing, we make sure that there's water, food, and peace for Palestinians who really need all our support. And they are enabled by our local media who whitewash the story, whitewash the genocide, and that is unacceptable. They are complicit in a genocide.
What about another aspect of how money can control a narrative, right? Media houses, many of them, the major ones, are owned by shareholders. And those shareholders could have business interests. They could have certain leanings purely because of monetary reasons. Is that something that has been uncovered, that in the South African context, certain media houses lean in a particular way because of pressure from shareholders or from directors that's placed on management, and then from management, obviously, that impacts on the editorial process and the frame within which the reportage on the issue takes place. And is that another area then perhaps that requires further investigation and interrogation?
Mulana, I mean, if you know from Noam Chomsky and Herman, they wrote their famous filtering 5 filters of media, how the media works. One part is media ownership, the shareholders. And he also has, I think, number 4, that those journalists who seek to speak out get flack inside the mainstream media. They get marginalized, they get pressurized, they get cajoled to toe the line. And I think part of that is inducements like this. So yes, those who own the media control the narrative generally. And that's why the SABC and others have to be protected by a charter that can make sure there's an arm's length relationship between funding sources, government in particular, and the message. But you know, the point you raise was raised famously by Ignacio Ramonet in an essay he wrote, Set the Media Free, in 2003. He basically said that as global powerhouses, the media now, their interest coincides with others in power, right? They are interested in, not so much interested in correcting the malfunctions of democracy and creating a better political system. They now have no interest in being the fourth estate, even less so acting as a countervailing force. He basically said the interest around money coincides. Business is money, right? That's where you can see that people's there's a juniorization of journalists there. They bring in young people, they're sharing copy, etc., etc. But the people who made the mistake here, I don't regard it as a mistake, who willfully made this mistake, are all experienced people with 90 years of experience collectively. But what does Ramonet says? He says that the fourth estate has failed. We need to create a fifth estate that puts civic force against a new coalition of media rulers. He's basically saying that because business has taken media so seriously, they don't give you information, they don't give you critical challenges, they give you stuff to just get you in line as factions. And there's no thinking, no discussion is the kind of things we want. You can see the Truth Social of Trump and others, they just one line, there's no suave, there's no sensitivity to difference, it's all one line. It's close to fascism that we're experiencing now. And that's why maybe the counterweight of citizens is important. And that's why I think we need to have an inquiry, a public inquiry hosted by the Press Council, so we citizens who are critical consumers of media, right, on our phones and elsewhere, must be together in this conversation so that we can talk about how media and our communications rights can facilitate the broadening of our democracy. You know, these days, if you don't have internet, it's almost as important, as difficult as not having food.
Yeah.
Because you don't know where to get the support, where to get this information that is happening. You are out, you are marginalized. We need both. We don't just need food, water, and we also need access. And that is why Israel, media, journalists from coming into Gaza to see for themselves. This is the world's only democracy in the Middle East. They stop journalists from coming in. They kill journalists. More journalists have been killed now than all the wars combined, I heard the other day at a protest, right? I mean, this is cruel. Simply saying that someone is Hamas, then you shoot them. 23-year-old person or whatever age, clearly is it. Where's the rule of law if you're a democracy, if you're the only democracy, or you're the only moral army in the world? Clearly, there are things that are wrong and they're being condoned. What we're asking for now is not to make enemies of the Sunday Times, the Citizen, and Business. It's for them to recognize this moment in history that they can do the right thing. They can come back and call for an end to media manipulation, call for an end to violence and genocide, and call for peace, water, ceasefire, justice for Palestinians, and for Palestinians to determine their own destinies.
So you
That's what
mentioned,
they can do.
Hassan, that you're wanting the Press Council to have a public inquiry, right? That's one option. What other options can be considered simultaneously in terms of the formal processes? And should there be simultaneous kind of active citizenry around this, where as citizens outside of these formal processes, we perhaps use social media platforms that are accessible to all of us to start naming and shaming those journalists and media houses that are reporting without making the ethical declarations?
You know, if I tell you, I haven't got permission from the comrade who wrote on her own bet. We've been in touch. She saw what we've been doing, Mulana, as we discussed here. So she works for campaigning around hardware, boycott around hardware for, against genocide and not making sure that we're complicit. She wrote to the editors of the Citizen, and she said, "Can you go public and say that what you did was wrong, and you won't do it again, etc., etc." And the editors, to their credit, wrote back to this lady, the woman, the mother, in a KZN home. And she said, they wrote to her, "Our statement is as follows. I would like to follow it up with a full staff meeting and explain the decision to make sure there are no doubts. The Citizen will no longer send anyone on sponsored trips to Israel. This is because these trips, being stage managed and carefully curated, deliberately only portray one side of the story. It is not possible to cover the other side because on these trips, journalists are restricted in where they can go and who they can talk to. No professional journalistic job can be done on such a trip." Now, this is what I've asked for. I've asked that we sit together. Yeah, Mulana, you come in there. I know you do a lot of homework. All of us, Radio Islam, Salam Media, everyone else comes in, Bush Radio, whoever it is. They all come in there and say, "Hey, no, let's have this discussion," because the smaller guys, look at community radio stations. Some of them are so commercialized, right? That they take the message of the bigger sponsor, could be a bottle store or whatever the story is. And so there is an issue that we need to have a big discussion on it. All my jobs have been around media and communication as an organizer. I worked. So I think that this will be really exciting. And you can hear, Molana, I'm not trying to, these are not permanent enemies. If they acknowledge what they've done wrong, they must come together. This is the moment where we need to just do the right thing. We can sort out whether they came yesterday or the day before, whatever. The truth is we need to put shoulder to the wheel. And you must ask why the government has been under so much attack for doing the right thing. It's because many of these guys are undertake. So I wrote to the city. You asked me what else we can do. So I said to the Sunday Times, "Can you do what the Citizen did? Can you do that?" So this is a citizen action, exactly what you said. This is citizen action, and we welcome that. I mean, I'm not putting myself up here as if what I'm doing is that I'm the only one who can do it. No, there are many people doing this. And what we need to do. This is the way to go. A conversation. If they can say this in private and engage in private, really all we have to do is a big meeting in a hall. And rest assured, we're peace loving and no one's going to throw stones. In fact, no bombs as people are dying there in Palestine. We do it for them to learn that we are not here to aid and abet Zionism. We're not here to aid and abet the killing of Palestinians or deny the killing, as the writer in the Sunday Times again did this week. And that's part of the problem of the Sunday Times. When the editor wrote to me, he says, "Look what a lovely article we had by Makudu, by Tsedu, Mandata said. We did a brilliant thing about the future of Gaza or something." And then this week, you get someone else writing in Siegel from the Zionist Federation, basically undermining everything that he said, putting in Hasbara stuff there, denying that 60,000 people have been killed, playing with the figures, saying as if the genocide is around numbers of people who are dying. I mean, that is so wrong. You've got to listen to the Jewish scholars and experts on genocide. Omar Batov wrote in a year ago, almost a year ago, in The Guardian, where he said before he didn't think it was a genocide. But by the time he went there in June 2024, he was convinced what the IDF has been doing there is genocide. He's an eminent scholar on genocide, and he's called it a genocide.
Hassan, shukran so much for your time and for chatting to us. We really appreciate it and keep up the good work.
Thank you very much, and you keep up the good work. Please push for that thing. If they don't want to call it a conference, we can call our own, so we
Inshallah.
can learn about this.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you for having me again.
Hassan Lorga talking to us about an article he penned for the Muslim Views, where he uncovered that a number of journalists from major media houses here in South Africa went on a trip to Israel, sponsored by pro-Zionist entities, and came back, did reporting, but did not disclose that this trip was sponsored. Good work there on his part, and it helps us to uncover where the narrative is being poisoned by bias or by financial incentive. Until next week, inshallah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.